Today, let us discuss about the US Cabinet. History of US Cabinet. The debates at the 1787 Constitutional Convention regarding whether the President should exercise executive authority solely or collaboratively with the Council of Ministers or a Privy Council. As a result of the debates, the Constitution under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 vests the executive power in the President singly and authorizes but does not compel the President under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 to require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. The Constitution does not specify what the executive departments will be, how many there will be, or what their duties will be. Thus, it is clear that on the question of how to establish advisory apparatus, they took the path of least resistance and left it to be hashed out later. George Washington, the first President of United States, organized his principal officers into a cabinet, and it has ever since been part of the executive branch structure. Washington's cabinet consisted of 5 members: himself, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of War, and Attorney General. Thus, according to presidential scholar Richard Fenno, the cabinet is institutionalized by usage alone. It is also clear that the US cabinet is less than the sum of its parts, that is, more significant as individuals than a group. Cabinet today. The 4 original cabinet posts, State, Treasury, Defense, and Attorney General, are considered to be most important and are referred to as the inner cabinet. During cabinet meetings, the members sit in the order in which their respective department was created, and the people who are appointed tend to be high stature because they deal with the core functions of government. The other executive departments were created to manage the demands of the interest groups. The cabinet today includes the vice president and heads of 15 executive departments and other key officials appointed by the president. The secretaries of state, treasury, defense, attorney general, interior, agriculture, commerce, labor, health and human services, housing and urban development, transportation, energy, education, veterans affairs, and homeland security. The cabinet also includes White House Chief of Staff, the US Ambassador in the UN, the Director of National Intelligence, the US Trade Representative, Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Management and Budget, Council of Economic Advisors, Office of Science and Technology Policy, and Small Business Administration. The exact composition can vary depending on the current administration. The Cabinet of the US is the principal advisory body to the President of United States. The Cabinet generally meets with the President in a room adjacent to the Oval Office in the West Wing of the White House. The President chairs the meetings, though he is not formally a member of the Cabinet. The Vice President serves in the Cabinet by statute. The appointments of heads of executive departments and certain key federal agency heads, except the post of Vice President and Chief of Staff, have to be presented to the Senate for confirmation or rejection by a simple majority. It is unusual for the Senate to reject President's nominees. In 1989, the Senate rejected President George H. W. Bush's nomination of John Tower as Secretary of Defense. Vice President Mike Pence in 2017 had to cast a 51st vote in order to break a 50-50 tie when the Senate voted to confirm Betsy DeGuarza as Secretary of Education. The President can dismiss them from office at any time without the approval of the Senate, or downgrade their cabinet membership status. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter removed 5 cabinet members all at once over questions of loyalty. The cabinet members are subject to impeachment by the House and trial in the Senate for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misendeavors. For example, William W. Belknap, Secretary of War in 1876, was impeached by House of Representatives for his role in the Trader Post scandal, but was acquitted by the Senate. Appointment of cabinet members. Presidents often take office promising to hold regular cabinet meetings, but then they realize they hit them. For example, President Trump held 49 meetings, while President Biden till recently held 10 meetings. It has been observed that the frequency of cabinet meetings decreases throughout the presidency. Today, it is difficult to have a meaningful conversation with so many people in the room. With cabinet meetings being infrequent, each member, the cabinet as a collective group, has very limited power. Today, main influence lies with key individuals in the cabinet. For example, under the Obama presidency, John Kerry, as Secretary of State, played an important role in developing foreign policy alongside the President. The cabinet has no constitutional status that would allow it to control policy and the right to govern. With cabinet members serving at the President's pleasure, the President has the final say on executive policies. Presidents may sideline individual members and seek advice from elsewhere. While cabinet members have a great deal of authority, it is the president who determines who to work with most closely. There is often a love-hate relationship between the president and the cabinet. The president appoints his cabinet members from the following backgrounds. First, Congress and governors. The president may recruit current or former members of the Congress or men with executive experience into his cabinet. For example, President Trump persuaded three incumbent members of Congress, Senator Jeff Sessions and Representatives Tom Price and Ryan Zinke to join his cabinet. President Biden appointed two former governors, Jennifer Granholm of Michigan as Secretary of Energy and Tom Vilsack of Iowa as Secretary of Agriculture. Second, big city mayors. The president may recruit big city mayors with executive experience into his cabinet. For example, President Biden appointed two former mayors, Marty Walsh, Boston, as Secretary of Labor and Pete Buttigieg, South Bend, Indiana, as Secretary of Transportation. Third, experts. The President appoints men and women who are experts in their respective fields. President Obama appointed Steve Chu, Professor of Physics at the University of California, as Secretary of Energy. President Clinton appointed Donna Shalala, an educator and University of Wisconsin President, as Secretary of Health and Human Services. President Biden appointed Lloyd Austin, a retired four-star U.S. Army general who led joint operations in the Middle East and Central and South Asia, as the Secretary of Defense. Thus, it is clear that the President is looking for in his cabinet is policy specialist. Therefore, while a competent cabinet can enhance a presidency, the opposite is likewise true. Fourth, long-time friends and campaign loyalists. Presidents have included long-time friends and campaign loyalists in his cabinet. For example, President Obama appointed Eric Holder, a long-time associate from his Senate days, as Attorney General. President Biden appointed Ron Klain, a senior advisor in his presidential campaign, as White House Chief of Staff. Apart from the above points, presidents like to have a balanced cabinet in terms of gender, region, race, age, and political ideology. Fifth, gender. Having all male cabinet is a thing of the past. President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933 appointed Frances Perkins as Secretary of Labor. President Clinton had 7 women in his cabinet 1993 to 2001. President Obama had 8 women in his cabinet 2009 to 2017. President Trump had 3, while President Biden had 5. the Biden government appointed Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation. Sixth region, when presidents appoint cabinet members from different regions of the country, it gives a picture that they intend to govern the whole country. Sometimes presidents' home state and region tend to be accommodated in the cabinet. For example, George W. Bush, Texas, appointed Alberto Gonzales as Attorney General, while Tommy Thompson as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Seventh, race. Race is an important factor in cabinet appointment. President Johnson in 1966 appointed the first African American to his cabinet. After this, the president's cabinet was not all white but all inclusive. For example, Bush cabinet had 5 members, Obama had 6, Trump had 3, Biden had 6 from ethnic minorities. Eighth, age. The average age of the cabinet usually reflects the age of the president. President Clinton's cabinet had an average age of 53. President Obama's cabinet was 55. Trump's cabinet was 63 and President Biden's cabinet was 59. Ninth, political ideology. The president may appoint men of the opposite party with opposite ideological background in the cabinet. It has become a semi-tradition. For example, President Clinton nominated Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, a Republican, as Secretary of Defense. President George W. Bush appointed Norman Mineta, a Democrat, as Secretary of Transportation. President Obama appointed Chuck Hagel, a former Republican senator, as Secretary of Defense. Role of cabinet meetings. The cabinet meetings helps to fulfill various objectives of the president's agenda. Thus, the role of cabinet meetings are as follows. First, team spirit. Unlike the parliamentary system, in the presidential system, the president appoints cabinet members after winning the election. As a result, they have not campaigned together and may not be bound by a shared ideology or mandate. Therefore, cabinet meetings create a sense of purpose and weld them into a team to fulfill the president's agenda. Second, collegial appearance. The cabinet meetings can be a public relations exercise and an opportunity for the president to send signals through media photo that he is collegial and consultative with his colleagues. Third, check on legislations. The president can use cabinet meetings to check up on legislations going through Congress in which they have a particular interest. For example, President George W. Bush used his 24th September 2002 cabinet meetings to push for congressional action on 3 key issues: authorization for military action against Iraq, the passage of the Homeland Security Bill, and the budget. President Obama used his 3rd February 2015 cabinet meetings to discuss his policy agenda in Congress for that year. President Biden used his 1st April 2021 cabinet meeting to help advance his infrastructural plan in Congress. Fourth, prompting action. Presidents use cabinet meetings to apply pressure on cabinet members into action. President Bush, during the lead-up to the Iraq War, encouraged Secretary of State Colin Powell to present a strong case for intervention at the UN despite Powell's reservations. Fifth, exchanging information. Cabinet meetings provide opportunities for both information giving and information gathering. The President can make statements at cabinet meetings knowing well that every member has heard them. For example, President Obama's statements advocating his cabinet members to support his vision, like the Affordable Care Act. The President can go round the table asking the cabinet members about their department and to give a brief report on departmental issues. Cabinet meetings can be used as a forum in which to debate policy. For example, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy convened cabinet meetings to assess the situation, encouraging debates to explore options before taking decisions. Sixth, the personal contact. The cabinet meetings provide an opportunity for the President to keep personal contact with his cabinet members. In case of infrequent meetings, the President may not remember cabinet members' names, or the President may forget who is in the cabinet. For example, President Biden occasionally stumbled in recalling the names of cabinet members during public appearances. At a White House reception for visiting city mayors, President Reagan mistook Sam Pierce, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, for a visitor and inquired, "How are you, Mr. Mayor?" Asked the President, "How are your things in your city?" On the other hand, attendance at cabinet meetings give cabinet members increased standing back in their departments because they have heard the President and they know what he wants today, as opposed to what others might think he wanted yesterday. Functions of the Cabinet. The functions are as follows. First, advising the President. The Cabinet members provide advice and recommendations to the President on matters related to their respective departments. Second, formulating policies. In line with the President's agenda, the Cabinet helps in formulating policies for their respective departments. Third, managing departments. The cabinet members manage their respective departments, ensuring that they operate efficiently and also resolve interdepartmental disputes and maintain administrative coherence. Fourth, implementation of policies. The cabinet members administer the execution of federal laws passed by Congress. Fifth, represents administration. The cabinet members represent the administration at international platforms and in interactions with the Congress. Conclusion. On one hand, individually, its members are important because they run big departments and have big budgets. But as Robert Shroon wrote, that no one in a cabinet outshines the President. On the other hand, Collectively, the cabinet is not important because the constitution gives executive power only to the president and the principle of collective responsibility does not exist. That is, the president is not first among equals but is simply first. As Professor Anthony King put it, he does not sum up at the end of the meeting, he is the meeting.